I stormed out onto my porch, my boots slamming hard against the wooden steps as I stared at the unbelievable sight in front of me. My heart pounded so loud it felt like a drum in my ears. Right there, across my land, a dozen trucks, bulldozers, and even 2 police cruisers sat parked in the middle of my fields. What made my blood boil wasn't just the heavy tracks gouged deep into my ranch's soil. It was the fact that a group of strangers wearing matching polo shirts with Pleasant Ridge HOA printed on them were hammering a giant wooden sign into the ground right by my front fence. Notice, $650,000 fine. Property in violation of HOA covenants. I blinked twice. I wasn't seeing things. They were serious. What in God's name are you people doing? I shouted, marching toward them. A middle-aged man with slicked-back gray hair and mirrored sunglasses sauntered up like he owned the place. He looked me up and down like I was some pest he couldn't be bothered with. "You're in violation, sir. Unauthorized structures, unauthorized livestock, non-conforming fencing, blah blah blah," he said, flipping lazily through a clipboard full of papers. "The fine as of this morning is $650,000, plus legal fees." I stared at him, mouth open. "I'm not even a member of your stupid HOA. I snapped. The man smirked. "That's what they all say. But our jurisdiction is expanding. Welcome to Pleasant Ridge Ranch lands. You'll want to pay up quickly. Interest starts tomorrow." The rage bubbling inside me was about to explode. But before I could respond, 2 burly security guards stepped in front of me like bouncers outside a nightclub. And that's when I saw it. Another team was drilling a lock onto my front gate, locking me out of my own ranch. The world spun around me. How was this even legal? How did they even get onto my land in the first place? I took a step back, clenching my fists so hard my knuckles turned white, my mind racing for answers. But deep down, a cold, ugly feeling told me this was only the beginning. Now, let me take you back to how all this insanity actually started. Just 6 months earlier, life was simple. My name's Jake Bennett, 42 years old, a widowed father of 2 boys, Ryan and Carter, trying to keep a promise I made to my late wife, Rachel, never sell the ranch, no matter what. It had been in her family for 3 generations. This land wasn't just dirt and wood, it was our whole life's memories. After Rachel's passing, the boys and I packed up everything and moved permanently onto the ranch full-time. It was quiet, peaceful, maybe a little too quiet for 2 energetic boys used to living closer to town, but they adjusted. We spent days fixing fences, mending the barn roof, and raising chickens, goats, and a few cows. I wasn't rich, but I was free. And to me, freedom was worth more than all the gold in the world. About 3 months ago, strange things started happening. First, I found glossy flyers tucked under my gate. "Pleasant Ridge Ranch Lands HOA welcomes you." They looked like junk mail, so I ignored them. Then came a letter, certified. It warned that new community guidelines were being enforced. It talked about fencing height, approved livestock, and even lawn maintenance standards. The letter said my compliance was mandatory and that non-compliance would result in escalating fines and property liens. I laughed it off. "Must be a mistake," I told Ryan, who'd handed me the letter while balancing on a skateboard in the driveway. "This is our ranch. Always has been. HOA's got nothing to do with us." Or so I thought. A few weeks after that, we noticed a shiny metal post stuck in the dirt way down by the south boundary, near the old oak tree. On it was a brand new sign, "Pleasant Ridge Ranch Lands, private property." It was weird, but I assumed it was on the neighbor's land. Figured maybe someone was starting a new development nearby. Again, I shrugged it off. The real trouble didn't start until one morning when Ryan came running into the kitchen, out of breath. "Dad, there's a truck by the creek. Some guys are measuring stuff." Sure enough, a white pickup with an HOA logo was parked by the water line. 2 guys in safety vests were setting up a tripod and taking measurements like they were surveying land. That time, I marched right up to them. "This is private property," I barked. One of them, a skinny man with a hard hat 2 sizes too big for his head, barely looked up. "We have authorization. You're under Pleasant Ridge jurisdiction now." "Like hell I am," I snapped. "Show me one piece of paper proving that." He shrugged. "Talk to the office. We're just doing our job." I was so furious I called the sheriff's office on the spot. Deputy Hall showed up about 20 minutes later. A young guy, barely out of college. After I explained, he scratched his head, looking uncomfortable. "Well, technically, if your property was annexed into an HOA development." I didn't join anything. I cut him off. He nodded awkwardly. "Yeah, but sometimes the city council can approve new zoning plans, especially if no one files a formal protest. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much." "What protest? I didn't even know about it." Deputy Hall sighed. "Might want to get a Mr. Bennett. Fast." It felt like the ground had fallen out from under me. In the days that followed, I made endless calls to the city zoning office, the county recorder's office, anyone who would pick up the phone. No one had clear answers. Some said my land might have been included accidentally in the new expansion plan for Pleasant Ridge ranchlands, and new luxury housing development being built miles away. Others claimed someone must have sold the development rights, but that was impossible. I owned this land free and clear. I started feeling like I was losing my mind. Then, last week, the final notice came, taped to my front door, $650,000 fine. Notice of foreclosure proceedings pending. It felt like a threat written in bold black ink. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning while dark thoughts swirled in my mind. How could they take everything from us like this? I was still trying to figure out a plan when the unthinkable happened. Early this morning, before the sun even rose, they came. Trucks, bulldozers, cops. And now, standing on my porch, I watched them take control of the land that had been my family's for generations. I gritted my teeth as the security guards muscled closer to me. One of them leaned in, lowering his voice to a threatening whisper. "Leave the premises, sir. You're trespassing now." A heavy hand landed on my shoulder. My instincts kicked in fast, too fast. Before I even realized what I was doing, I shoved the man's hand away hard. He stumbled back, but the other security guard immediately radioed someone. In the next second, the 2 sheriff's deputies by the bulldozers reached for their tasers. My heart jumped into my throat. I threw my hands up, but it was too late. A voice crackled over the radio. "Subject resisting. Proceed with detainment." The deputies started sprinting toward me. And just like that, I knew I was about to be arrested on my own ranch. I stood frozen for half a second, my hands still raised, watching the deputies barrel toward me like a pair of linebackers. Every instinct in my body screamed to run, but I knew better. Running would only make things worse. "Don't move." One of them barked, taser pointed straight at my chest. "I'm not resisting," I shouted back, but it didn't matter. In their eyes, I was already guilty. The first jolt hit me like a truck. The taser prongs stuck into my shirt and fired off a bolt of electricity that made my knees buckle. I crashed to the ground, my face scraping against the rough gravel as I gasped for air. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Ryan and Carter standing by the window inside the house, their faces pale and terrified. I wanted to scream for them to stay inside, to not get involved, but my body wouldn't cooperate. Heavy boots stomped closer, and seconds later, my hands were yanked behind my back, cold metal cuffs clamping around my wrists. "You're under arrest for trespassing, resisting, and assault on a security officer," the deputy growled as he hauled me roughly to my feet. "I didn't assault anyone," I protested, but my words fell flat against the roar of the bulldozers revving in the background. As they shoved me toward one of the cruisers, I caught a glimpse of the slick-haired HOA guy watching smugly from the side, arms folded across his chest. He gave me a little mock salute, like he was sending me off to prison with his blessing. The cruiser door slammed shut, trapping me inside. Through the glass, I could still see the workers busy tearing up my ranch, digging trenches, installing pipes, moving heavy equipment. It looked like they were building a whole new subdivision right on top of my family's history. As the car pulled away from the ranch, my heart sank deeper and deeper into my chest. Was this it? Was this how they stole my life away from me? Was I really powerless to stop it? The drive to the county jail felt like a blur. I stared out the window, the landscape rolling past like some distant world I no longer belonged to. At intake, the officers processed me like a common criminal. Fingerprints, mugshot, the whole deal. They threw me into a cold cell with a single metal bench and a flickering light overhead. It smelled like sweat and bleach. I sat there, still cuffed, staring at the floor. After what felt like hours, a gruff man in a tan uniform appeared at the bars. "Phone call," he barked. They uncuffed me long enough to drag me to a wall-mounted phone. I fumbled for the only number I could think to call, my friend and neighbor, Mike Harris. Mike picked up on the third ring. "Jake, where the heck are you, man? Your boys are scared out of their minds." I choked back the lump in my throat. "They arrested me, Mike," I said. "Said I was trespassing on my own land." There was a long pause. "This is insane," Mike muttered. "Listen, sit tight. I'm heading down there right now, and I'm bringing backup." He hung up before I could even ask what he meant. I shuffled back to the cell, wondering what Mike could possibly do against a massive HOA and a sheriff's office that seemed to be helping them. I didn't have to wait long. Maybe 40 minutes later, a different officer came. The bars and barked, "Let's go." He led me down a hallway toward the front desk, where Mike stood, arms crossed, flanked by two other men I didn't recognize. Both were wearing dark suits and had serious expressions. "This is Mr. Bennett's attorney," Mike said, jerking his thumb toward the taller man. "And this," he added, pointing to the second man, "is from the media." My mouth dropped open. The media. The suited man, the lawyer, stepped forward and slid a stack of papers across the counter to the sergeant on duty. "You're holding Mr. Bennett illegally," he said coolly. "Release him immediately or face a federal lawsuit for unlawful detainment and violation of constitutional property rights." The sergeant's face turned a shade paler. The lawyer wasn't done. "Furthermore, we have evidence of trespass, vandalism, unlawful seizure, and criminal conspiracy on the part of Pleasant Ridge HOA against a private citizen who is not under their jurisdiction." He tapped the papers sharply. "You're going to want to think very carefully about your next move." The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The sergeant grunted, muttered something under his breath, and disappeared into the back. 15 agonizing minutes later, he returned, looking furious. "Remove his cuffs," he snapped at one of the deputies. Just like that, I was free. As we walked out of the jail, blinking against the afternoon sun, Mike clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Didn't think I'd let them railroad you, did you?" he said with a grin. I gave a shaky laugh. "You brought a lawyer and the media." Mike shrugged. "Figured it might help." The reporter, a short woman with fiery red hair, was already setting up a camera on the sidewalk. "Mr. Bennett," she called out, "can you give a statement about what happened on your ranch today?" I opened my mouth to answer, but then my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Ryan. "Dad, they're cutting down the barn." My stomach twisted into a knot. I turned to Mike, my voice low and urgent. "We gotta get back now." We jumped into Mike's truck and tore out of the parking lot, tires screeching. As we sped toward the ranch, my mind raced faster than the engine. If they destroyed the barn, they'd destroy the heart of the ranch, the very building Rachel's grandfather had built with his own two hands back in 1927. The place where Rachel and I carved our names into the rafters on our wedding day. The place where my boys had hidden Easter eggs every spring. They were erasing us. Mike slammed his fist against the steering wheel. "This ain't legal, Jake. No way." But the law wasn't moving fast enough to stop them, and we both knew it. As we rounded the bend onto my road, a sickening sight unfolded before us. The barn, my barn, was already half torn down. The roof sagged dangerously. Wooden planks lay shattered across the grass. A bulldozer sat idling nearby, its metal blade dripping with splinters. And standing right in front of it, holding a bullhorn, was the same slick-haired HOA guy, barking orders like he was directing a demolition crew. I leapt out of the truck before Mike even fully stopped, running full speed toward the barn. "Stop!" I screamed at the top of my lungs. The man with the bullhorn smirked at me and gave the bulldozer driver a thumbs up. The machine lurched forward. With a deafening crunch, the last standing wall of the barn toppled over. A cloud of dust rose into the sky. I dropped to my knees in the dirt, coughing, my heart breaking right there on the spot. That barn had been everything, and now it was gone. Mike raced over, grabbing my arm. "Jake, we gotta document this. Get photos? Get videos. They can't sweep this under the rug." I nodded numbly, wiping the dust from my face. Through the haze, I caught the slick-haired man sneering at me. He pointed a finger like a loaded gun. "This is just the beginning, Bennett," he said coldly. "Either pay your fines, or Pleasant Ridge Ranch lands will own you." My fists clenched so tight I thought I might break my own bones. Not if I had anything to say about it. Not without a fight. Not ever. I stood there, staring at the wreckage of my barn, feeling like someone had reached into my chest and ripped my heart out. The bulldozer backed away with a hiss, leaving behind nothing but a shattered pile of wood, dust, and memories. Mike squeezed my shoulder. "Jake, we need to act now. Fast." I nodded slowly, forcing my legs to move. My boys stood a few yards away, clutching each other, their faces dirty and tear-streaked. I waved at them to stay back. I needed them safe. Mike pulled out his phone and began filming everything, the destroyed barn, the workers, the trucks, even the smug HOA enforcer. I followed his lead, snapping pictures with shaking hands. "This footage is gold," Mike muttered. "Proof. They're going down." But even as he spoke, the HOA guy barked orders to the workers to speed things up. More trucks started rolling in, bringing loads of concrete, bricks, and what looked like new road signs. "What are they doing now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Mike's mouth tightened into. "Looks like they're prepping for construction." I felt dizzy. "Construction on my land?" Mike grabbed my elbow. "We gotta shut this down." I didn't even hesitate. We raced back to Mike's truck, kicking up a cloud of dust as we sped toward town. Our first stop was the county clerk's office. I slammed open the heavy glass door and stormed up to the front desk. A young woman with thick glasses and a nervous smile blinked up at me. "Can I help you, sir?" "For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. I need to see any and all records showing that Pleasant Ridge HOA has jurisdiction over my property," I said, my voice shaking with fury. She fumbled at her keyboard. "Name, address?" I rattled off my information. She typed quickly, her eyebrows knitting together as she stared at the screen. A few moments passed. Then more moments. Finally, she looked up at me, confused. "Sir, there's no record of your property being part of Pleasant Ridge Ranch lands." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Say that again," I said, stepping closer. "You're listed as independent land, private ranch property, not under any HOA management." Mike let out a low whistle behind me. I felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly swallowed by anger. If that was true, then everything they were doing was illegal. I gritted my teeth. "I need a printed copy of that. Certified." "Of course," she said quickly, printing off a thick bundle of papers and stamping them with an official seal. With the documents clutched tightly in my hand, we bolted to the sheriff's office next. The same deputy who arrested me earlier, Deputy Hall, was standing behind the front desk. His face flushed the moment he saw me. "You again?" he said, his voice tight. I slammed the paperwork on the counter. "You illegally detained me. You allowed a private organization to trespass and destroy my property. I want an immediate investigation." Deputy Hall hesitated, glancing nervously around the lobby. Mike leaned forward. Unless you want to see your department's name plastered all over the 6 o'clock news, I suggest you do your job." That did it. Deputy Hall sighed heavily and picked up the phone, calling for the sheriff. While we waited, Mike whispered, "Stay calm, Jake. They'll try to stall. They'll try to intimidate you." "I'm done being calm," I muttered. The sheriff, a stocky man with a thick mustache, Sheriff Doyle. I'd met him once at a town fair. He seemed decent back then, but now his expression was unreadable. "I hear we got a situation," he said, motioning for us to sit. I laid everything out, from the bogus fines to the bulldozing of my barn to the illegal seizure of my land. Sheriff Doyle listened quietly, occasionally jotting notes. When I finished, he rubbed his chin. "Mr. Bennett, I won't lie. This sounds bad. But we'll need to open a formal investigation before we can take any action." "How long?" I asked. "Could be weeks," he said. "Maybe longer." I stared at him in disbelief. "Weeks? By then, there wouldn't be anything left of my ranch to save." Mike jumped in. "You realize they're building on his land right now, right? Every hour you delay is another law broken." Sheriff Doyle sighed again. "I'll send someone out to take a look today. That's the best I can promise for now." It wasn't good enough, but it was something. Mike and I left the office, both boiling with frustration. "They're playing games," Mike said, starting the truck. "We need to find someone higher up," I said. "Someone who can shut them down now." Mike tapped the steering wheel thoughtfully. "I might know someone. City council. Old buddy from college. Might be able to pull some strings." I nodded grimly. "Call him." Mike pulled out his phone and started dialing as we sped back toward the ranch. When we got there, my heart sank. The workers had already dug massive trenches across the front of my property, and heavy machinery was moving piles of dirt around like they were building an interstate. The boys ran out to meet me, terrified. "Dad," they said, "they're putting in a new road." Carter cried, tears streaming down his cheeks. I knelt down and hugged both my sons tightly. "Not if I have anything to say about it," I whispered fiercely. Suddenly, there was a loud roar of engines behind us. We turned to see a long line of black SUVs pulling onto the ranch. At first, I thought maybe it was the sheriff's department coming to shut things down. But as the cars stopped and men in suits climbed out, hard-faced men with earpieces and sunglasses, a cold knot twisted in my stomach. These weren't cops. These were private security. And at the front of the group stood the same smug HOA leader, smirking wider than ever. He raised a megaphone to his mouth. "Jake Bennett, you are hereby ordered to vacate the premises immediately. Failure to comply will result in physical removal." The security guards fanned out, hands resting casually on their belts, where pistols and tasers gleamed in the sun. Mike cursed under his breath. "We're outnumbered," he muttered. I squared my shoulders, stepping protectively in front of my sons. I wasn't going to back down. "Not now, not ever." I shouted back, "This is my land." The man with the megaphone laughed. "Not anymore." He nodded to his men. And just like that, the guards started advancing fast. The security guards closed in fast, their boots pounding the dirt like a small army. My boys clung to my sides, terrified. And Mike stepped up beside me, his fists clenched. "Jake," he whispered urgently, "we need to get the kids out of here now." I nodded stiffly, my heart hammering in my chest. No way am I letting these thugs get anywhere near my sons. "Take them to your truck," I said, keeping my eyes locked on the advancing guards. "Get them out of here, Mike. I'll hold them off." Mike hesitated for a split second, then grabbed the boys by the shoulders. "Come on, guys. Trust your dad. Go." Ryan and Carter ran with him, looking back at me with wide, frightened eyes. I gave them a reassuring nod, even though my stomach twisted painfully. As soon as they reached the truck, Mike threw open the door and shoved them inside. Meanwhile, the guards formed a semicircle around me. I counted at least 10 of them, too many to fight off, not without getting hurt, or worse. The HOA leader walked up slowly, savoring every step like he was some kind of king claiming new territory. "You're trespassing on private property," he said smugly, waving a fake-looking piece of paper at me. "This is my land." I barked back. He chuckled. "Was. Now it's under Pleasant Ridge management. You failed to pay your dues. Failed to comply. You lost it." My blood boiled. "I never joined your HOA. I never agreed to anything." He shrugged like it didn't matter. "Doesn't matter what you think, cowboy. It's all paperwork now. You're done." The guards moved in closer. I backed up slowly, feeling the crunch of broken wood from the demolished barn beneath my boots. Mike's truck roared to life, dust flying as he spun it around to face the road. Good. At least the boys would be safe. But as I watched Mike's truck pull away, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going down like this. I darted to the side, heading for my old workshop behind the house. I heard the guard shout behind me, heavy footsteps pounding after me. I yanked open the shed door and dove inside, slamming it shut and bracing it with my shoulder. Inside, my old hunting rifle hung on the wall, right where I'd left it. I hesitated. Pulling a gun would escalate everything. It might turn this ugly situation into a deadly one. But then I remembered Rachel's voice in my head, soft but firm: "Protect the boys. Protect the ranch. Protect what matters." I grabbed the rifle. I didn't point it at anyone. I didn't chamber around. I just held it across my chest and shoved the door back open. The guards froze in their tracks. "I'm not looking for trouble," I said loudly, my voice steady. "But I will defend my property." They shifted nervously, hands twitching near their belts. The HOA guy's smirk faltered for the first time. "You really want to do this?" he sneered. "You want to go to prison over some broken-down ranch?" I tightened my grip on the rifle. "I'll go to prison," I said. "But you're going to have to explain why your men were trespassing and threatening an innocent citizen on private land." For a long moment, no one moved. The dust swirled in the hot afternoon air. The only sound was the distant roar of machinery tearing into the earth. Then, slowly, the HOA guy raised his hand. The guards hesitated, then backed off a few steps. The leader lowered the megaphone and glared at me. "This isn't over, Bennett," he said coldly. "We'll be back, and next time, you'll wish you left when you had the chance." With that, he turned on his heel and stalked back to his SUV, slamming the door. One by one, the security team retreated, glancing over their shoulders at me like I was a wild animal about to charge. I stood there, breathing hard, until every last SUV disappeared down the dusty road. Only then did I lower the rifle, my hands trembling from adrenaline. Mike pulled back into the driveway a few minutes later, the boys wide-eyed but safe in the back seat. "You all right?" he asked, jumping out. I nodded stiffly. "For now." We spent the next few hours surveying the damage. The barn was a total loss. The trenches they dug ripped across half the ranch like angry scars. Fences were knocked down. Fields flattened by heavy machinery. It felt like they had trampled my entire life into the dirt. By sunset, I was exhausted, body and soul. I sat on the porch steps, staring out at the wreckage, feeling like a failure. Mike dropped into the seat beside me. "We'll rebuild," he said quietly. "We'll fix this." I shook my head. "They'll just come back with more men, more paperwork, more lies." Mike grinned grimly. "Then we hit 'em where it hurts." I looked over at him. "What do you mean?" He pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. It was already trending. Videos of the illegal bulldozing, the fake notices, the arrest, the private security, hundreds of comments pouring in, people furious on my behalf. "This thing's gone viral, Jake," Mike said. "And I got a buddy with a national news outlet who wants to interview you tonight." I blinked at him, stunned. "Said with the wrong guy," he said, clapping me on the back. "We're going to blow this thing wide open." For the first time all day, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could fight back. Maybe this wasn't the end. But just as the stars began to appear overhead, Mike's phone buzzed again. He frowned at the screen. "What is it?" I asked. He showed me the text: "City Council meeting scheduled for emergency vote." Pleasant Ridge Ranch lands authorized to seize properties immediately if unpaid dues exceed $500,000. My heart stopped. They were fast-tracking the legal theft of my ranch. And the vote was happening tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. If we didn't stop them in time, everything I loved would be gone forever. The sun had barely risen when Mike and I loaded into his old pickup truck, both of us running on nothing but black coffee and sheer desperation. The boys stayed back with Mrs. Palmer, our elderly neighbor, who promised to keep them safe no matter what happened. We raced down the empty back roads toward City Hall, the truck tires spitting dust the whole way. Neither of us said much during the drive. We were saving every ounce of energy for what was about to come. When we reached the parking lot, it was already packed. News vans lined the street, cameras mounted on tripods, reporters bustling everywhere. The videos Mike had uploaded last night had exploded across the internet. It wasn't just our small town that was watching now. The whole country was. I stepped out of the truck, feeling every pair of eyes snap toward me. Some reporters rushed forward, microphones outstretched. "Mr. Bennett, how does it feel to be the face of illegal HOA overreach? Do you have a statement for the hundreds of property owners watching online?" Mike pulled me through the crowd, shielding me like a bodyguard. Later, he muttered to them. Inside City Hall, the air was thick and buzzing with tension. At the front of the room sat a long, polished table where the city council members, 6 men and 1 woman, shuffled papers and adjusted microphones. And right in the middle, sitting smug and relaxed, was the same slick-haired HOA president. He caught my eye and smiled like a snake that had already swallowed its prey. The mayor, an older man with a deep scowl and a gavel clutched tightly in his fist, slammed it down to start the meeting. "This emergency session will now come to order." One of the councilmen stood up and read the proposal in a bored, mechanical voice. Due to repeated non-compliance and non-payment of mandatory HOA dues by property owners within the Pleasant Ridge Ranch Lands Expansion Zone, the council moves to authorize immediate property seizure for unpaid balances exceeding $500,000. The words felt like knives carving into my chest. The mayor tapped his gavel again. "Discussion?" One of the other councilmen, a bald, sour-faced man, leaned into his microphone. "Let's not waste time. These ranchers had plenty of notice. If they refuse to cooperate, that's on them." There were murmurs of agreement. It was happening. They were railroading me, railroading us, right into losing everything. Mike nudged me hard. "Now, Jake. Speak up now." I stepped forward before I could lose my nerve. "Excuse me," I shouted over the murmuring crowd. Every head in the room turned. I could feel my heart pounding against my ribs like a drum, but I kept walking until I stood in front of the council table. "My name is Jake Bennett," I said, my voice steady. "And I am not a member of Pleasant Ridge Ranch Lands. Never have been, never signed a thing, never agreed to anything. I have proof." I held up the stamped documents from the county clerk's office that my property was illegally annexed without my knowledge or consent. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. The HOA president laughed under his breath. I ignored him. "I also have video proof," I continued, "that agents of Pleasant Ridge HOA trespassed onto my land, bulldozed my barn, damaged my property, assaulted me, and falsely accused me of violations that never existed." The council looked uncomfortable. A few leaned back in their chairs, exchanging uneasy glances. The mayor leaned forward, peering at the papers in my hand. "You have evidence?" he asked gruffly. "I do. And if you don't stop this vote," I said, raising my voice so the entire room could hear, "I will file a federal lawsuit against this council, the HOA, and every individual involved." There was a gasp from the back of the room. Mike grinned beside me. The media were loving it. Cameras flashing, microphones being shoved closer. One of the younger councilmen cleared his throat. "Maybe we should review the HOA president snapped, standing up so fast his chair toppled over. "This man is a liar," he barked. He owes us $650,000. He broke HOA rules. He resisted security officers. He's dangerous. I met his glare without flinching. If that's true, I said calmly, then why do I have a certified document proving I'm not part of your HOA? The room fell dead silent. The HOA president's face turned bright red. The mayor pounded his gavel again. "Mr. Crane," he said, addressing the HOA president. "Sit down, and let us review the evidence." Reluctantly, the HOA guy, Crane, sat down, fuming. The mayor turned to me. "Submit your documentation to the clerk. We will postpone the vote until after a full investigation." A wave of relief crashed over me. Postpone. That was enough. Enough time to get real legal muscle involved. Enough time to fight back. I handed the papers to the clerk, my hand still trembling slightly. As I turned to walk back to my seat, the crowd burst into applause. Some reporters were already live streaming, shouting into their cameras, "Jake Bennett just stopped the illegal property seizure." Outside after the meeting ended, reporters mobbed me. I gave a short, shaky interview, telling them everything about Rachel, the ranch, the fake notices, the trespassing. Within minutes, it was all over national news. Mike clapped me on the back so hard I nearly stumbled. "You did it, man," he grinned. "You bought us time." I smiled weakly. "Yeah, but it's not over yet." And I was right, because just as we were pulling out of the city hall parking lot, Mike's phone buzzed again. He answered it on speaker. It was Mrs. Palmer. Her voice was shaking with fear. "Jake, men just showed up at your ranch. They're pouring concrete over your front fields, blocking the driveway. They said they're building a permanent access road." I froze. Even though the council had delayed the vote, the HOA wasn't waiting. They were trying to destroy my ranch before the law could catch up to them. Mike floored the gas pedal, the tires screaming as we shot down the road. "Hang on, boys," he muttered grimly. "It's about to get real ugly." I gripped the dashboard hard, my knuckles white. One thing was clear, this time, we weren't going to City Hall. This time, we were going straight to war. Mike's truck flew down the winding country road, the engine growling like a caged animal. My fists were clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. Every bump in the road jolted me, but I didn't care. All I could think about was the image of strangers pouring concrete onto my family's land. "Faster, Mike!" I barked, my voice strained. "We're almost there," he shouted back over the roar of the engine. As we rounded the final bend, my stomach twisted into knots. They weren't just pouring concrete. They were building a massive road right through the heart of my property, over the old garden, over the fields where my boys and I used to ride our dirt bikes, straight through everything we loved. A concrete mixer churned in the middle of the field, pumping out thick gray sludge. Several construction workers wearing the same HOA polos were directing bulldozers and jackhammers like generals leading an army. Standing on a raised platform, a brand new portable office slapped down on my land like a wart, was Crane, the smug HOA president, barking into a walkie-talkie. I could hear his voice even from the truck. "Pour faster. Get that road down. I want this locked in before that trencher brings back his lawyers." I felt my blood boil hotter than it ever had before. "They're making it permanent," I whispered. Mike slammed the brakes, skidding the truck to a stop right at the broken front fence. We jumped out. The moment Crane spotted me, he raised his bullhorn again. "Jake Bennett, this land is now under the management of Pleasant Ridge Ranch Lands. Leave immediately or face arrest." I stepped forward without hesitation. "You have no authority here," I shouted back. "City Council put your seizure on hold. This is illegal." He just laughed. "By the time the council finishes dragging their feet, this road will be done. Then it's too late. Physical improvements can't be undone without court orders. Good luck affording that, cowboy." He wasn't even hiding it anymore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated land grab. Mike leaned toward me, speaking low and fast. "Jake, we can't fight them head on. They'll just claim we assaulted them. We need witnesses, Cameras, proof. I nodded. We both started filming with our phones, walking slowly across the dirt toward the chaos unfolding on my ranch. A few workers noticed us and shifted nervously. Crane barked more orders through the bullhorn. Ignore them. Pour the concrete. One bulldozer driver revved his machine loudly, inching toward us as if to scare us off. I refused to budge. I kept filming, heart hammering, legs trembling from fury. Mike stepped closer to the concrete mixer, filming the wet gray sludge oozing across my fields like a poison. "This is destruction of private property," Mike shouted to the camera. "Live proof." Suddenly, one of the security guards, the same musclehead from the earlier confrontation, stormed toward us. "You're trespassing," he bellowed, jabbing a finger at Mike's chest. Mike didn't flinch. "This is private land," Mike said coldly, keeping the camera steady. "You're trespassing." The man grabbed for Mike's phone. "Bad move." Mike jerked back, and the phone slipped from the man's fingers, landing safely in Mike's pocket. The guard stepped forward aggressively, fists clenched. I instinctively stepped between them, and that's when it happened. Security guard threw a punch right at Mike's face. There was a sickening crunch as Mike stumbled backward, clutching his jaw. The cameras were still rolling. All around us, the construction workers froze, eyes wide. Even Crane hesitated, realizing the mess his men had just created. Mike straightened up slowly, blood trickling from his lip. He smiled grimly. "Got that on camera," he rasped. It was over for them. They knew it. The guard's face turned pale. He looked desperately at Crane, who looked like he wanted to melt into the ground. I pulled out my phone and hit send on the video, uploading it directly to the news station that had been covering my story. Within seconds, the footage was live. A news van that had been tailing us from City Hall screeched into the driveway. Reporters jumped out, microphones waving. "Mr. Bennett, what just happened?" I pointed back at the construction site where the mixer still churned helplessly. "They attacked us on private property," I said loud and clear. "We have video proof. We have witnesses, and we will be pressing charges." Crane's face turned beet red. He shouted something unintelligible into his walkie-talkie. And in moments, the construction equipment began shutting down. Workers dropped their tools and scrambled toward their trucks. The entire operation was unraveling right in front of them. A deputy sheriff's cruiser pulled into the lot moments later, lights flashing. Deputy Hall climbed out, his expression grim. "What the hell's going on now?" he muttered. Before Crane could spin another lie, Mike walked right up to the deputy and showed him the fresh footage. Deputy Hall watched it silently. When it ended, he looked up at Crane with a new, hardened expression. "Mr. Crane," he said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit unlawful property damage, trespassing, and assault." The look on Crane's face was pure disbelief. You can't arrest me. I'm with Pleasant Ridge HOA. I'm protected." Deputy Hall just shook his head. "Not today, you're not." As they hauled Crane toward the cruiser, the reporters swarmed around, cameras flashing, microphones jabbing. I stood back, breathing hard, watching the scene unfold. It felt unreal, but it was happening. Finally, justice was coming. As the last of the workers fled and the concrete mixer was turned off for good, Mike limped over to me, grinning despite the blood on his chin. "You did it, Jake," he said. "You saved your ranch." I wanted to believe it, but deep down, I knew it wasn't over yet. Because just as Deputy Hall loaded Crane into the back of the cruiser, Crane turned and shouted one last threat at me. "This isn't over, Bennett. You think Pleasant Ridge is just going to walk away?" His voice echoed across the empty fields. I stared after the cruiser as it pulled away. Maybe Crane would be gone, but the fight to protect my family's land was just beginning, and I was ready for whatever came next. The dust hadn't even settled when the real battle began. In the days following Crane's arrest, the story exploded. News outlets across the country picked it up. Local rancher versus HOA tyrants. Illegal HOA land grab exposed. Family ranch saved after viral video. People I didn't even know started reaching out, lawyers offering to represent me for free, politicians looking to score points by standing up for the little guy, and everyday Americans offering donations to help rebuild the ranch. At first, it felt overwhelming, but after everything we've been through, it also felt like a tidal wave of hope crashing over a burned, battered shore. Mike, bruised but still grinning, sat with me on the porch every evening, sorting through all the offers. "We got 3 law firms ready to file a civil suit," he said one night, flipping through a thick folder of papers. "One's already talking about punitive damages. Big ones." I leaned back in my chair, watching the sun dip low behind the battered fields. "Good," I said quietly. "But it's not just about money." Mike nodded. "It's about stopping them. Making sure they can't do this to anyone else." The city council, under the glare of public outrage, moved quickly. They officially revoked the Pleasant Ridge Ranch land's expansion jurisdiction, dissolved their authority to annex independent properties, and opened a full investigation into how Crane and his cronies had manipulated zoning records. It turned out Crane had bribed 2 low-level city officials to quietly alter maps and property lines, moving boundaries, forging signatures, burying paperwork. It was criminal, and now it was public. The officials were arrested. Crane faced multiple felony charges. Pleasant Ridge HOA's leadership resigned in disgrace. The lawsuits piled up like cordwood. By the time the dust truly began to settle, Mike and I stood shoulder to shoulder, watching workers, real ones, hired legally by the city, remove the concrete road they had tried to build across my fields. Bulldozers tore it up in massive slabs, carting it away like garbage. It was satisfying in a way I could hardly put into words. Piece by piece, we were reclaiming. One afternoon about a month after everything had started, I sat at the kitchen table with Ryan and Carter. We spread out papers, plans for rebuilding the barn. "This time," I said, smiling at them, "we're going to build it even stronger." Ryan grinned. "Can we paint it blue this time?" Carter nodded eagerly. "And add a big swing out back." I laughed. "You got it. Blue barn, big swing, whatever you want." We were designing a future, not running from fear anymore. And it wasn't just the barn. With the national attention, donations had flooded in, people who believed in standing up to bullies. We had enough to not only rebuild the barn but also restore the old fencing, repair the pastures, even install a new irrigation system Rachel had always dreamed of. It felt like she was with us somehow, smiling over our shoulders. One evening, just before sunset, I hosted a barbecue at the ranch, a thank you to everyone who had stood by me. The turnout was incredible. Neighbors, ranchers, news crews, lawyers, friends, all laughing, eating, clinking glasses together under strings of glowing lights hung between the trees. Mike stood up on a makeshift stage, a couple of hay bales stacked high, and raised his glass. To Jake Bennett, he said loudly, the man who stood his ground when everyone else said to give up. The crowd erupted into cheers. I lifted my glass, overwhelmed, humbled. "I didn't do it alone," I said, my voice catching in my throat. "I had all of you, this land, and this life. It's not just mine. It's all of ours. It's worth fighting for." The crowd roared again, toasting under the wide, starry Texas sky. Later that night, as the party died down and guests headed home, I stood alone at the edge of the field where the barn would rise again. The air smelled of mesquite smoke and fresh-cut grass. I tilted my head back, staring at the stars. For the first time in a long, long time, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise. A soft breeze whispered across the fields, and for a brief moment, I imagined I could hear Rachel's voice carried on the wind. "You kept your promise, Jake." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I smiled through them. Yeah, I had. The Bennett Ranch would stand, and no HOA, no corrupt president, no greedy developer was ever going to take it from us again. Not in my lifetime, not ever. As I turned back toward the house, toward my boys, our future, and the life we were rebuilding from the ashes, the first beams of the new barn frame were already going up under the moonlight. And with every nail driven, every plank laid, We were hammering home a message loud enough for the whole world to hear: this land was ours, and it always would be.